Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, we are continuing our series of shirim with regards to the healing waters of Rabbeinu Arizal. And it so happens that the shir was recorded earlier and it went well, and then it was all lost. So Be'ezras Hashem, this will be a second attempt to try and convey the same amount of information, and taking into consideration that the experience of losing the first year and trying to double it is really part and parcel of the content of the shir itself, Be'ezras Hashem. So like we said, this was going to be the last of the introductory shirim to the beginning of the process of understanding the Arizal and the context that we're going to be trying to understand. And it's going to be framing the context. And with regards to framing the context of the writings of the Ari, we've already discussed how the Gilui of the Arizal, the Gilui of Eliyahu Hanavi, took place on the banks of the Nile River, which teaches us that it's only from within the privation and the alienation of self on the banks of impurity, in that place of concealment, in that place of stuckness, in that place of loss, that actually offers the hope necessary to uncover the newfound vistas of spiritual creativity and Gilui that the Arizal gave us. And it's specifically out of that place of the urgency of needing to uncover the inner interiority of this worldliness that gives us the Torah of the Arizal. In order to understand the Torah of the Arizal, especially as it is seen through the lens of the Arba Naharos that are Yotzim and Hagan, including the Talmidim of the Ari, Mahari Soruk, as well as Rav Chaim Vital, we have to go to the next point in the Arizal's process of experience, which is arriving in the town of Tsfas. Much like the life of the Arizal, which begins in Yerushalayim, descends down into the banks of the Nile River, only to emerge out once again with newfound intensity in the town of Tsfas, the teachings of the Arizal are a teaching of undergoing various shifts, breakages, breakdowns, traumas that give birth to new forms of revelation. The Kabbalah of the Arizal is very far from an idealized form of transcendental knowledge which offers calmness, light, and experience at every point in which one turns. It is not a world-denying system, but rather it is a system of understanding, a system of development that takes the very fabric of this worldly experience into deep consideration. Because the Kabbalah of the Arizal, as we're going to see, and the framework in which the Kabbalah of the Arizal really takes place, is ultimately the process of coming to terms with the disparity between the belief in an infinite God and the reality of living in a finite world where everything seems to occlude and cover over the presence of godliness. And it's specifically from within that place of descending down into the particulars that we're going to uncover the koach, or the real chiddush, of what Rabbeinu Yitzchak was teaching us, what the Arizal was teaching us. Now, in order to begin properly, we have to return back to something that we've learned about already, which is the 10 Sfiros. Now, the Arizal, obviously, as a true Mekubal who's following the writings of the Mekubalim who preceded him based on the writings of the Zohar HaKadosh, is operating within the world of the 10 Sfiros. Suffice it to say that, as we're going to see when it comes to the Arizal's vision of Partsufim, we're going to see how the particularized points of the Sfiros really serve to create a gestalt or a configuration that is greater than the sum total of its parts. But nevertheless, the Sfiros themselves, the basic building block of all that exists, both time, space, and individually, everything is rooted and comprised in these 10 vessels, these 10 aspects that HaKadosh Baruch Hu utilizes for the sake of creation to reveal himself in this world. When it comes to the subset of the 10 Sfiros, we find the fundamental split, one that creates two divisions within the realm of the 10 Sfiros, each division operating in accordance with its own particular halachos. We have the Gimel Rishon, the upper 3 Sfiros, and we have the Zayin Tachtonim, which are the lower 3 Sfiros. The Gimel Rishon, without counting Das, which is a separate conversation, which we'll discuss in the Shirim on Shira, we have Keser, Chachma, and Binah, and the Zayin Tachtonim represent Chesed, Gvura, Tferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malchus. Now, in the world of the upper 3 Sfiros, things operate in an idealized form, removed from the symptoms of what it means to be susceptible to change, pollution, and difficulty. Masha'en Kain, the 7 spheros, the lower 7 spheros, which represent the changeable emotional space wherein things are susceptible to difficulty, concealment, and all forms of congealment. The upper 3 spheros represent the intellectual inner realm of the neshama in the mind that operates and views experience devoid of any consideration of difficulty. It doesn't need to come in contact with the schwerkeit of it all. It doesn't need to take into consideration the fact that while we speak about presence, all we encounter is absence. In the ideal form of things, the reality of the situation does not take away one iota from the ideality and the true way things are supposed to function. In the Zayin Tachtoinim, in those elements of the spheros that are susceptible to shvira, that break, that are covered over, that can become points at which impurity can cling onto, that's the point where it's really about reality. It's a realized experience as opposed to an idealized experience. The objective realm of the ideal operates in the Gimel Moichin, as we're going to see, and the reality of disintegration operates in the lower Zayin spheros. Now, for a brief purpose of an overview, we have the 3 upper spheros, which represent Keser, which is going to be the Galgalta, that point of emergence of selfhood, which is born out of the delicate balance of pleasure and desire, a desire towards pleasure and the pleasure within desire itself. It is Ratzon, it is yearning towards some ideal. It is the emergence of a concept prior to the specificity or even the framework of the question of what we're discussing. After Keser comes Chachma. It's going to be the right brain. It's going to be a holistic vision of things, devoid of any particularization, because there's no possibility of particularization in that place of fluid unity of Chachma. And then the left brain is going to be Binah, which is going to be understanding, which is the beginning process of the emergence of disintegration and fragmentation. But what is fundamental to bear in mind is that in the world of Binah, fragmentation and disintegration have not yet begun to emerge, but rather it is the nascent potentiality of the emergence of fragmentation while it is still caught up and contained within the unbridled unity of infinitude. Those are the 3 upper spheros, Keser, Chachma, and Binah, and then Das, which is a separate consideration. Afterwards, we have the Zayin Tachtoinim, Chesed, Gvura, Tsfas, Netzach, Hod, and Yesod. These elements of self, these emotional points of emotional intelligence, of encounter, of subjective experience, are susceptible to change. They can be utilized for the benefit, and they can be dragged down for the opposite of good. They can be experienced in a positive way, and they can be shattered apart into various traumatic symptoms where a person struggles with the stuckness that they encounter in this emotional swamp-like experience of the spheros when they break. Now, the right arm of expansivity is going to be chesed, it's going to be connectivity. The left arm of gvura is going to be the restrictive sense that seeks to place a limit in front of the unbridled extension and expansion of chesed. And then you're going to have the impossible paradox and beauty of paradox, the paradox of beauty and the beauty of paradox within Tiferes, which is going to be the torso itself, which represents the ability for those 2 parts to integrate themselves together in a unity that upholds the opposition of chesed and gvura. Then, in the second triad of those 3 expressive spheros, you're going to have Netzach, which is the ability to be victorious, to overcome preventions in one's life, to push forward beyond the boundaries, which is an extension of Chesed, a desire to move forward. That's going to be the right leg. Then you're going to have Hod, which is an extension of Gevura, which represents powerlessness, the acknowledgement of powerlessness, and the powerlessness of acknowledgement. And that's going to be Hod, which is going to be the left leg. Yesod is the capacity of connectivity. It is where all of the kochos coalesce together to reveal themselves in a form of hyperessentiality, of something specific and point-like. And then we're going to have the experience of Malchus, which is going to be simple expression of that which is. Now, the first triad of the spheros, Keser, Chachma, and Binah, represent things in their pristine state, while the 7 lower spheros of the Zayin Tachtoinim, Chesed through Malchus, represent things in their deficient state. Now, the problem that we encounter here is that anytime we're talking about a unit that contains opposites within itself, meaning the 10 sphera unit, which seemingly contains these 2 polar opposite spaces of operation, the Gimel Rishon in their ideality and the Zayin Tachtonim in their reality, what we need to uncover is a bridge that allows these 2 opposites to cooperate together. Because the bridge, the Memutza HaMechaber, the intermediary that connects, needs on the one hand to be connected to the upper realm, and it also needs to be connected to the lower realm, which means to say that this bridge, this liminal space, needs to maintain two sides to itself. The first side will represent the lowest edge of the upper moichin of the Gimel Rishon, and the bottom edge will represent the highest point of the Zayin Tachtonim. And where is it that this bridge is going to express itself? The bridge that connects the Gimel Rishon, the purified space of Keser Chachma and Binah, as well as the Zayin Tachtonim, the broke down place of these seven spheres that are susceptible to brokenness, is going to be the space of Binah. Now, Binah is going to represent this liminal space wherein we are both operating within the realm of purified unity as indicative of the Gimel Rishon, but also the nascent potential towards emergence, which is going to mark the territory of the Zayin Tachtonim, which is why we identify Binah as the Ima. It is the mother of the Zayin Tachtonim. It is the womb in which all potential fragmentation will eventually emerge. But in spite of the fact that it is the point of impregnation and the potentiality and the state of expectancy that anticipates this differentiation and all of the banim and the banos that come out afterwards, Binah is fundamentally still within the realm of unity, to the degree that we cannot speak of Binah as being something that is fragmented, nor can we speak about Binah as something that is completely removed from fragmentation. Rather, Binah needs to be seen as the site of the emergence of fragmentation in a non-fragmented state, or the possibility of difference within an undifferentiated state, a womb-like state that contains the potential of relating to the children that will emerge out of it, as well as retaining its idealized form of that which precedes the emergence of differentiation. This is why Binah is referred to as Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Chayim, because it contains Elokim and it contains Chayim. It contains the singular unity of the Gimel Rishon, of purified ideality, as well as the Elokim as the potential emergence of fragmentation, which takes place through the Zayin Tachtonim. Binah is going to be referred to as the shirish of the Shnei Hafachim, of a dual pulsation of oppositional sway within itself, as Rav Menachem Mendel of Shklov points out, because on the one hand, it represents a purified space of unity. On the other hand, it represents the emergent potential of disunity. Binah, as we're going to see, maintains this identity as its very, very condition. Each and every sira has a shame that is associated with it. In order to transform from the speculative contemplation of the spheres or the spheros and the Seder Shtalshalos, what the Rashash, based on the Arizal and Shar Kavanos and Pri Etz Chaim, gives us is the ability to transform these concepts into tefillah, as Rabbi Nachman says, to transform our Torah into tefillah. And this is where the spheros undergo a transition, where they become shemos, where they represent different ways that HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals himself. Lefi ma'isi ani nikra. I am referred to by my name in accordance with the activities in which I perform, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And each sphere represents a different expression. The shame associated with keser, which is expectancy and ratzon and desire rooted in a moreness that is beyond the fathomability of the human being, is going to be the shame eke, aleph k, yud k, which is an-nazam in the mahave. I am anticipating the newness that was about to emerge. It's a name of absolute expectancy towards that which is beyond me. That's the light of Keser. Chachma, on the other hand, is going to be the Shem Ka, Yud K, because it represents expansivity and it's associated with Chesed. The Shem of Binah is going to be the Shem Havaya, which on the one hand represents Rachamim Rabim. It represents the unified spheres of the upper world of unity, but at the same point, the Nakudos, the way in which it is going to be read, meaning to say the way in which it is going to express itself to others other than itself, which is the purpose of the vowelization. The nakudos of the Shem Havaya of Binah are going to be the nakudos of Elokim, as we're going to discuss in a second. Then the Shem of Das, which we're not discussing, is Aleph K Vav K, Es HaShamayim Ve'es HaAretz, which represents connectivity. It's the Gematria of Yud Zayin, which is Tov, because all goodness stems from connectivity and all connectivity stems from goodness. And then we're going to have the Shem associated with Chesed, which is going to be Chesed Kel Kol Hayom, Kel, which represents expansivity. Elokim, which is Gvur, is going to represent the constriction applied to that expansivity. Tiferes is going to be the unification of all things, the site in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chvoidoi v'atzmo is mislabesh, so to speak, in a way that we can have access to that which we can never have access to through the secret of faith. That's Shem Havaya. Netzach as a continuity of the right side of Chachma and Chesed is going to be Hashem Tzivakos. Netzach as a Hod, as a continuity of Binah and Gvura, is going to be Elikim Tzivakos. The shame associated with the Yesod is Kel Shakai, which represents enoughness and the belief that what I have is exactly what I need, and it's the belief in hyper-essentialism, which the Yesod represents. And the shame associated with Malchus is Aleph Daled Nun Yud, which is Adnus, which represents simply the way things actually are. Now, the name associated with Binah is Hashem, which represents Rachamim. It represents full and expansive unity associated with the Gimel Rishon, but at the very same point, it represents the nascent emergence and the impregnation of the potential towards differentiation associated with Elohim, because it is the Eim Habanim Samecha. It is the source of differentiation, while at the very same moment, it contains and maintains its original form of unity, to the degree that Binah represents the source of refinement, but also the point of emergence of dinim and gvuros and limitation from within refinement. This is what the Zohar HaKadosh means when it says that dinim misabramine, that din and gvura are emergent, are impregnant, that Binah is impregnated with the potential towards the emergence of fragmentation, yet nevertheless it maintains its idealized state as being something that is prior to any disintegration or fragmentation, to the point that Binah is the source of all dinim, but is also the source of the refinement of all dinim. That which emerges from Binah is going to be severity, constriction, difficulty, limitation, and all of the difficult things that we come in contact with, the symptoms of day-to-day life. But at the very point, the source of these dinim is refined to the degree that the dinim at that place are shown to be nothing but the vessel through which HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals himself, which is what we mean when we say that Binah is the makom of hamtakas adinim b'sharasham, that when we can take the symptom and draw it back up to its source, we can come to understand that while the symptom might be difficult, nevertheless it is emergent from a very specific and particularized way through which HaKadosh Baruch Hu is revealing himself, and therefore Binah represents both the birthplace of dinim, and it also represents that point in which dinim are going to be transformed and rectified. V'nahapoichu, as the Arizal says, all hippach is rooted in Binah because it has the capacity of a dual pulsation of paradoxical elements operating at once. It's going to be the site of hamtaka, of hippuch. It's going to be the site of tshuva. It's going to be the site of freedom. It's going to be the site of the potential towards mistakes, because as Chazal tell us, bina miklal deta'a. If I'm operating in a space of bina, the implication means that I've already made a mistake, but it's also the ability to stand up from a mistake. It's the ability to make tshuva. It's the ability to return back from the descent into disintegration and draw disintegration back up to the unity prior to fragmentation. This is the world of bina. Binah represents the emergence of difficulty from within that secret place, where difficulty is shown to simply be another revelation of the ultimate easiness and the menucha of yichud itself. Binah is that transition point between the world of unity into the world of fragmentation, without ever allowing itself to become polluted by the halachos of the world of fragmentation, yet making room for fragmentation itself. Now, when it comes to understanding the Arizal, what we have to understand is that in the context of what we're going to be discussing, the Arizal is rooted singularly in the place of Binah. The avoida of the Arizal is an avoida of Binah. It's a hisbaininus. It's a havanas hadavar mitoch davar. It's the ability to break up unity into various parts to the degree that I can understand one part of something from another part of something, creating relationship where there was previously unity, but also allowing the unity to maintain itself in spite of the disunity and the fragmentation that takes place. It is the emergence of difficulty, yet it is the very rectification of difficulty itself. We see in the Arizal that most of his writings are rooted in the expression of Binah. First and foremost, if we look at the Talmidim of the Arizal, let's look first and foremost at Mahari Saruk and his Kabbalah, the Olam HaMalbush, the Tihiru Ilah, and the Adam Kadmon and Stima'ah, which we described last week as the worlds that are higher than the Kabbalah of Mahar Chu, the first Shem Havaya. And then we also have the world of Rav Chaim Vital, the Kabbalah of Rav Chaim Vital, where we'll also see the expressivity and the intensity and the role that Binah plays. In the realm of Binah, when it comes to the Kabbalah of Mahari Saruk, we have to again introduce ourselves to another introduction. And this is how we're going to come in contact with some of the ideas, like we said, as Leshem introduces us in the Hakdama to Hakdamus Sha'arim, that when it comes to a Chachma like this, you have to be patient with not knowing what we're talking about until the rules emerge and we begin to hear a little bit more. So just like we said, that there's a Shem Havaya. The Shem Havaya represents the four worlds that Rav Chaim Vital speaks about, Atzilus, Bri, Yitzir, and Asiya. and it represents the four major partsufim of Chachma, Binah, Zer Anpin, and Malchus. Chachma is Chachma, it's going to be referred to as Abba. Binah is Binah, it's called Ima also. And then Zer Anpin is going to be Chesed, Gvur, Tferes, Netzach, Hod, and Yisod, which all coalesce together to create the parts of Zer Anpin, which is the Vav. And then you have the Nukva of Zer Anpin, the feminine quality and receptivity of Zer Anpin, which is the Malchus itself. So you have the Yud K, Vav K, which correspond to Atzilus, Bri, Yitzir, and Asiya, and Chachma, Binah, Zer Anpin, and Malchus. Now, each of these four letters, each of these four partsufim, each of these four worlds have a permutation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name associated with it. Now, the Ramami Pano in his Maimer Hamiluyim points out that there are many, many, many different ways to spell out the Shem Havaya, depending on how we fill through Miloi the other osios. But for the Arizal, the Halacha Lamaisa is the four Tzirufei Shem Havaya, which correspond to the four letters of Hashem's name, which correspond to the four worlds, which correspond to the four major partsufim, as we're going to see. And that is going to be the Shem Havaya b'Miloi, Ab, Sag, Ma, and Ben. The Yud is associated with Chachma, is associated with Atzilus, is going to be the Shem Havaya spelled out with Yuds. Yud, Vav, Dalid, Hey, Yud, Vav, and Hey, Yud, which is the gematria of Ayin Beis. In the world of Bina, which is going to be the Os Hey, which is going to be the world of Bria, so we have the Miloi of Havaya in the numerical value of Sag, 63. Now here we find Yudin and Alfin. So it's Yud, Vav, Dalid, Hey, Yud, Vav, Aleph, Vav, in contradistinction to the Shem Havaya Da'ab, which is Vav, Yud, Vav. Here we have the spelling of Vav, Aleph, Vav, and then Hey, Yud, which represents 63. Then you have the Shem Havaya associated with the Ois Vav, which is associated with the parts of Zer Anpin, which is associated with the world of Yetzira, which is going to be the Shem Havaya B'Miloi Alfin, Yud, Vav, Dalid, Hey, Aleph, Vav, and Hey, Aleph. And then you're going to have the Shem Havaya associated with the lower Hey of the Shem Havaya, which is the world of Malchus, which is the world of Asiya, which is the Maras Machpela. It's just a doubling of itself, which is Yud, Vav, Dalid, Hey, Vav, Hey. So what we find is that the Shem Havaya associated with Bina is going to be the Shem Havaya of Sag, of Kulam Sag Yachtav, of the secret of Bina being associated with Sag. And in the world of Mahari Sarug, what we very quickly come encounter with is the fact that the emergence of the possibility of conversation, the emergence of the communication of the ideas that the Arizal wants to give is rooted in the Yud that is left over from the Miloi of the Shem Sag. This is what Rav Shemayr, Morgenstern Shlita, and his base Medrash are bringing out more and more, Be'ezras Hashem, through the importance of the Kabbalah of Mahari Saruk, as we discussed last week. But suffice it to say that the entire process of Mahari Saruk and his Kabbalah is emergent from the Shem Havaya of Sag, which is associated with Bina, and all of the different elements that come with it, the folding and the constriction and the intensification. All of these ideas are rooted in the concept of Bina. So no matter how lofty we're speaking about, even in the loftiest worlds of the Olam HaMalbush of Mahari Saruk, we're also only talking about Bina. Then when we transition to the Kabbalah of Rav Chaim Vital, we see this even more explicitly, because we understand that Bina is associated with the Nun Shari Bina. The Nun Sha'arim represents fragmentation into 50 different gates of entering into the same place. The paradox of unity being splintered into something different than unity, but at the very same time that disunity that is emergent from unity maintains fundamental connection to unity, to the extent that the Nun Sha'arim of Bina all bring us back to the same place of unity. When we look at the Eitz Chaim Kadisha, the magnum opus of the Arizal, as codified by Rav Chaim Vital, we find that there's Nun Sha'arim, there are 50 gates to the Eitz Chaim Kadisha, representing the fact that the entire expression of the Ari is really bringing us encounter with this concept of the Nun Sha'arim, of the Nun Shari Bina. In addition to that, after Eitz Chaim, we also have the Shmoina Sha'arim, we have the 8 writings of the Ari, and 8 is associated with Bina, because counting from Malchus up backwards is going to be the 8th sphere from Malchus is going to be Bina, which is why Yitzchak is 8 times Shem Havaya, because Yitzchak is associated with Bina. Bina represents the Olam Hashmini, as the Maharal describes so often, B'nei Bina, Yemei Shmoina, that it's L'ma'alim min Hateva, that Shmoina, that ability of Shmini is the secret of Bina. And so what we have is, on the one hand, we have the Nun Shari Bina of the Eitz Chaim Kadisha, and we also have the Shmoina Sha'arim, which is the secret of the 8 Sha'arim, which is Bina itself. In addition, aside from the framework of the Kabbalah of the Arizal, we also have the content of what the Arizal is going to be describing to us. in the Arizal's writings themselves, as they're codified by Rav Chaim Vital, what we're going to find is that the loftiest place that we're able to begin the conversation of what we have access to is going to be the Shem Havaya of Sag. When it comes to the Oiris of Adam Kadmon, and this is again something we're going to be discussing at length, that Adam Kadmon is the first shape in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals himself in the concept of a system, in spite of the fact that the infinitude of HaKadosh Baruch Hu negates systems, is Adam Kadmon. And in the Eitz Chaim, we're going to understand that we cannot speak of the inner interiority of Adam Kadmon. We can only speak about the lights that emerge from Adam Kadmon Kavyachol. And again, there will be further shirim to describe these concepts in depth. Now, the place where the oros are yotze from Adam Kadmon are referred to as achap, oizen choitem peh, the ears, the nose, and the mouth. The oros that we begin the conversation with are the oros ha'oizen, which are the oros of Sag, which are the oros of Binah, which is why the Leshem says in the Arizal, you always have a language of trying to understand all of these metaphors, that they're there l'shaber es ha'oizen, to kind of enable the ear to begin to hear these things. This is up the Leshem. The reason that the metaphor is always the ear is because the ear is what's associated with Binah. The Shem Sag that we begin to discuss when it comes to the Oiris HaOizen, which is the Abd Sag, what we're going to see is that it's all associated with Binah. Binah is associated with Tashma. Binah is associated with come and hear. At the point of fragmentation where Trei Kali Lo Mishtati, where a person cannot hear more than one voice at a time because of the disintegration and how each one needs to be understood in its own particularization. Ma'ashein Ken Chachma, which is the Einayim, which is far beyond our conversation and what we're able to discuss, as Arizal tells us, that's about Re'iyah. There a person can see everything at once in spite of the fact that it's devoid of particularization. Bina is the emergence of particularization, and we see explicitly within the Ari that everything begins from Bina itself. As the Zohar Kadosh says, that we have to look at mi bara ele. The highest point that we can consider is mi, which is the 50 gates of Bina. We cannot conceive of more than Bina. Bina is the gate that allows us to access the higher levels of Chachma and Keser, and it's also the gate that allows us to descend down into the lower levels of the Zayin Tachtonim of Chesed through Malchus. So here we have explicit, both from Mahari Sarek as well as Rav Chaim Vital, that the Kabbalah of the Arizal is deeply rooted in the world of Bina itself. Now, why is this? What is it about the Arizal that is so deeply rooted in Bina? And I believe the answer rests in the fact that Kabbalah Arizal is coming to do a radical thing. Kabbalah Arizal is stuck in between two fundamental postulates. Number one is that the infinitude of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Or Ein Sof, the infinite light of the Ribbon Shleilam, the fact that Einon Movado is abundantly clear. On the other hand, it is abundantly absent, and the entire system of the Kabbalah of the Arizal is coming to try and make room for understanding how infinitude can minimize itself and express itself in finitude, how the unlimited can express itself as something limited, how absolute light can express itself through the lens of darkness itself. And it would be all too easy to say, okay, it's all infinite or it's all finite. But the secret of the Kabbalah of the Arizal is that both elements remain true at the very same time, with neither negating the value and the significance of the other. The Kabbalah of the Arizal, the secret of the Arizal, the Raza de Yitzchak, the secret of Rav Yitzchak Luria, is how the infinite can express itself as finitude. Finitude maintains its own self-identity, at least apparently, as something finite and separate, yet at the very same time, it maintains a deep connection and a revelation of the infinite itself, to the degree that the distinction and the separation and the particularization associated with distance and concealment is not a negation of the infinite, but rather it is the application, the clarification, the intensification, and the magnification of the infinite itself, to the degree that every particular point, every shar, every splinter, every fragment doesn't negate unity, but rather it becomes another gate through which the power of unity is actually going to be revealed. The Arizal does not want to say all of the particularizations of Bina are fake, and really all that is real is the infinite light of unity, because the need of the particularizations is to enable us to uncover a deeper expression of infinitude. Prior to the Arizal, there was an expression of infinitude. The Kabbalah of the Ramak, the Kabbalah of the Rishonim and the Goinim focused far more on Ayin. It focused far more on the Bilti Gvul. The Kabbalah of the Arizal is coming to focus on Gvul itself. It's coming to focus on how HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in his infinitude, completely negates the possibility of any type of system. A system implies levels, it applies maneuvers, it applies applications and levels and distinctions and beginnings and ends and points of transference and points of the conservation of energy and windows and ceilings and holes and doors. That, at first glance, is the polar opposite to what unity might look like. But in the Arizal, all of these things are ever present. There are levels upon levels upon levels, proliferation of details, prate pratius upon prate pratius, ad kedekach, that a person can lose themselves in all of the pratim and feel that they're stuck in a world of disintegration. But the entire tachlis of the Kabbalah of the Arizal, the entire tachlis is to show how, in truth, the infinite does not get scared in the face of finitude. The infinite does not get scared in the face of particularization, because each and every particular serves as the role of magnifying the infinite. The system is a system, while at the very same point it's a non-system. The entire chiddush of the Arizal is that he wrote a self-erasing text. The Arizal is giving us a framework of details, a framework of fragmentation and difficulty, that each and every point of fragmentation and difficulty is simply another entry point to where we come to realize that, oh my goodness, it's still a revelation of the infinite, thereby magnifying the potential of the infinite. Because prior to the descent into the details, into the particularization of Binah, into the Nun Shari Binah, there was only the infinite itself. There was only unbridled light of the Rabbanu Shlalem, which is not a chiddush. It's what we refer to as Tainug Tamidi Eno Tainug, the perpetual pleasure of self-identity, of unity, becomes boring after a while, because there's no distinction, there's no disintegration, there's no fragmentation, there's no struggle that a person has to fight against. It's specifically by shining the light of unity into the vessels of particularization and allowing the light of unity to survive and reveal itself within the vessels of particularization without negating the particulars of disintegration, because the particulars of disintegration are nothing but a further expression of the infinite. That's where the deep secret, that's where the schoik of Yitzchak is going to emerge from, where we come to realize that in truth the infinite is also expressive in the finite also, because finitude is simply another tool of the infinite itself. And this is what reveals the chiddush of the entire Nakuda of the Ari, which is the chiddush of Yitzchak, which is the chiddush of Binah, which is the ability to send down deep into Gvuros and reveal that there also we're going to find and uncover the light of the Rabbanu Shlalem. We can listen to the Lashon of Rav Yitzchak Meyer Morgenstern Shlita, where he describes this fundamentally as such. He says, Iker HaChiddush, the fundamental novelty, Shahoisif Rabbeinu HaAzriel, Arizal, ala Kabbalah Saramak. What's the main Chiddush? What did the Arizal add? As explained in depth in the writings of Rabbeinu Aharon Meister Celia. The Rabbeinu Ha'ari hu de Galilon Malas Kayach HaGvul, that the Arizal was the one who came along and revealed to us the ascendant principle of the power of limitation, of Binah, of concealment, of tzimtzum, of particular points and fragmentation. Shadaika al yado netoisif kishut b'chidush b'bechinas hayichud atmidi the bilti bal gvul tfei mimashaya mekoidim shenaskala hagvul. And it's specifically from within the particularization and the fragmentation of Binah that we have the capacity of adorning perfection, or revealing how perfection is not only static in its absolute infinitude, but it's dynamic as it expresses its infinitude within fragmentation itself. And it's the chiddush of the yichud hatmidi abilti ba'gvul. It's what allows us to bring about novelty within the unchanging unity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because when we descend down into the particularization, when we descend down away from the yichud into particularization, and then we come back up, the Chayzer Va'ila, the Nikla Ba'ayichad Apashat, or in Sof, when we take all of the systems and the particularization and the Nun Shari Binah and the fragmentation that has emergent in the Kabbalah of the Arizal that he received on the banks of the Nile River, as Netoisef Tnua B'toich HaYichad or in Sof. At that point, when we elevate all of those particulars back up into the realm of unity, where we show that the particularization, the Ani, is simply a kli to be Megala the Ayin even more, at that point we introduce the movement of novelty and renewal within the self-same simplicity of the unity of the Or Ein Sof, because the power of limitation from its own perspective is considered the polar opposite, the absolute opposite of the unlimited light of the Or Ein Sof. But when we re-include and reveal the power of limitation within the unlimited itself, at that point we add and we draw down, we're moisif a tnua, we create the possibility of movement. We allow for fragmentation to reveal itself to be just the handmaiden of revelation, where the ani and all of the particularizations and difficulty and symptoms and all of the expressions of all of this in each and every one of our lives ad haprata yotam b'furat sheyachol lapare, to the lowest possible particularization that one can particularize, we come to find that all of this is just there to magnify the unity of the bilti bagvul. And at this point, nimsa ki hayichud kalum miyesh v'ayin kachada. Now, it's not only ayin. HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't only reveal himself in chachma. He doesn't only reveal himself when things are revealed to be infinite, but rather he reveals himself mitzad hayesh as well. Asher al yedei kach mischadesh hayichud b'chol eis b'tainig mechudash. At this point, we can create a newfound feeling of pleasure, because each and every moment of concealment, each and every moment of particularization, each and every detail, each and every level, each and every name, each and every kli, each and every or, each and everything that can possibly be written about or expressed by way of limitation of language, which seems to be the polar opposite of the unlimited, is transformed immediately into the opportunity to reveal the Rebbeinu Shalom in an even deeper way. This is the chiddush of the Ari. This is the chiddush of being born in Yerushalayim, of being born in that place of absolute unity, going down into the place of Tzimtzum, to live on the banks of the Nile River, of particularization, of concealment, of Mariris, and then to ascend back up into Tsfas, which is the place that we're going to see where we reveal the deepest secret of the details that elevate and allow the deep unity of Or Ein Sof to be Megala itself even further and even deeper. This is what we see explicitly. We're going to come in contact with the writings of the Arizal, and it's the polar opposite of what one would expect when they come in contact with a quote-unquote mystical system, as opposed to denying the world, or denying reality, or denying fragmentation, or denying the all-too-human conditions of what it means to be stuck with a war in ourselves and to run into a space of transcendence. The Arizal drags us further down into a world of immanence. He drags us into the Mamalik Alaman. He drags us into the concealment and the particularizations and the mathematical details and complications of what it means to see the system itself. And from within the system itself, he subverts it to reveal that the system is just a self-erasing text. Every detail is simply a detail to reveal another infinite expression that is so powerful that the detail continues to exist. Each and every prat, each and every shar, each and every manifestation of something individualized or particularized with all of the symptomology that comes along with it is another opportunity to reveal the Tsfas Kisha, to reveal the deep light that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has in store for us within each and every particular. The secret of Dir B'Tachtainim, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to reveal himself Dafka Mitzad Eloikim Chaim, Dafka Mitzad the Dinim. Otherwise, we wouldn't have to had come on to the entire system of the Arizal. We wouldn't need all of the particulars. Many people, when they start learning Kabbalah, they feel, what is this expansivity into particularization? It's like mathematics, it's confusing. I have to hold cup on all of the cheshbonos, and all of that is true. But the ultimate purpose is to take all of those particularizations and to expand the particularizations, particulars upon particulars upon particulars. The prate pratis, as the Torah Chacham describes. But every prat is just another opportunity of v'yiskadel v'yiskadeh shmei rabba, that each and every point is another way to reveal the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu with even more intense revelation, because every time we transform a moment of particularization into being the seat of the infinite, so then the infinite is expanding its koach, and we come to reveal the Tsfas Kishat. We adorn perfection. We reveal how perfection can become more perfect, specifically by revealing itself within imperfection itself and transforming the very fact that the fundamental imperfection that exists within reality by design is in truth just another way that the fundamental perfection of the Rebbeinu Shalom is going to reveal himself. Now, all of this is associated with the town of Tsfas. Tsfas is an Ir Miklat, the Chesed LaAvram says. The Ir Miklat is a place where a person who accidentally murdered is going to find relief. One will find no comfort in Kabbalah Arizal if they do not feel the urgency of running into an Ir Miklat. A person has to approach the writings of the Arizal, like we spoke about, through the lens of Lule Sarasva Sha'ashua Azavaditi Bi'ani. I need the Kabbalah of the Arizal to give me life. I need the Eitz HaChaim. If I don't feel the fundamental urge to the Eitz HaChaim, I will never taste from the Eitz HaChaim. I will be satisfied with the Eitz HaDas Tovara. I'll be satisfied with every other Eitz in the world. If I don't feel that I'm a drowning person without the Kabbalah of the Arizal, without Panimius HaTorah, then I will never fundamentally enter into the writings of the Arizal properly. I will never break my mind over the writings of the Arizal. I will never learn how to cry in order to understand what the Eitz HaChaim Kadiyah Elisha is telling me. I will never learn how to repeat over and over and to read each shar over and over. Kuli haiv ulai, perhaps, just perhaps, like the Balab Sulam says, perhaps HaKadosh Baruch Hu will be Meir Einenu. If we don't feel the urgency of needing an ear miklat, of being chased by something that we don't know what, then we'll never enter in to the world of Kabbalah Arizal. Then we'll never be zocha to enter in to the world of Tsfas. Tsfas, the Chesed LaAvram says, is the Mispar Katan, Chaf Aleph, which is the shame associated with Keser, as well as Binah on one degree or another, which is Eheke, Aleph K, Vav K, Aleph K, Yud K, 21, because that's the shame of Tshuva. The world of Tshuva, the world of Binah, is one who has fallen and gotten back up. Tsfas, we're told, if you look in Divrei Hayamim, it was conquered by Shimon and it was given over to the tribe of Naphtali. Naphtali is a lashon of nefila. It's only for a person who falls and is able to get back up. It's only a person who falls and knows that they have to run so fast to fight against Esav. Naphtali, connectivity, that's the place of Tsfas. Tsfas is a lashon of tzipia, a lashon of yearning. Yearning is only necessary when that which I so desperately desire is not yet present. The Tsfas is rooted in the tzafon, that which is hidden away. Mesafon tiftach hara'a. It's difficulty, it's negativity, it's all of the severity, but at the very same point, ma'rav tuvcha asher tzafanta l'reacha, that the goodness is going to be revealed specifically within the gvuros that are nimtak. When I take all of these details, all of these proliferation of concealments and simtsumim, and I elevate them back up, and I come to realize that it's not only when I negate the tzimtzum that I come to find the Rabbanu Shleilim, but in and of the tzimtzum itself is a revelation of the Rabbanu Shleilim. It's not only when I break free from the kalim that I can taste the oros, but it's about coming to understand that the kalim themselves are the or. The mania itself is the place where we're going to uncover the neimus of Binah, the or hanoyam, the noyam ha'elyon, which is the or of Binah. That's the world of Tsfas. The Zohar HaKadosh says mefurash in a very powerful way in Parsha Shlach and Daf Kuf Ayin Gimel Amud Beis. It says as follows. The pasuk says, "Asher safanta l'reacha." Mahju asher safanta. Hashem, why are you hiding anything? What need is there to conceal something? V'chiman yigzol v'yitol min yadei ma dahave bayin me'ev dechsiv safanta. Is it possible for a person to come along and take which is not theirs rightfully from you to the degree that you have to hide it? Ella puk v'chami. Come and see. Uvdin derachminu da'avid kutchabrichu b'madi ihu machi be'yahav asvasei. Come and see how wondrous the activities of God are, for the thing that he causes the blemish with is the very source of the cure. The secret of mamtik mar b'mar, the secret of mineu be avenagre, that from the forest itself comes the handle for the axe, from the concealment itself comes the revelation of the infinite. That b'machame machi b'smoila, HaKadosh Baruch Hu punishes with the left, with concealment. U'biyamina kariv b'smoila machi, because we know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu draws close with the right and distances with the left. B'ma de machi be'yahav asvas el oilam, but it's specifically the thing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has punished with, that he will bring healing to the world with. How do we know? Mitzafon tiftach hara'a. The pasuk in Yirmiyah says that it's from the north, from Tsfas, from that hiddenness, where negativity will arrive. U'betzafon machi, but it's specifically going to be Safon that creates all of the difficulty. Why? This is where all the gezeros and all of the difficult decrees are going to come from, because concealment leads to all of the symptoms of our individual experiences. All of it stems from the fact that we find ourselves in the prat, that we find ourselves in the particular, that we find ourselves in a post-Simsum world. All of that gives birth to the kasha and all of the difficulty of alubei shari kol agar tov, but it's specifically there that all goodness and all good reward is going to be hidden. And all of the goodness that HaKadosh Baruch Hu stands at the ready to reveal to Klal Yisrael, L'zimna the asi, in that time that is to come, Kari Kutshabrichu L'tzafon, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to call out to the north, V'yemalei, and he's going to say to the north, to Tsfas, Bach Yahavis Kol Tiv V'chol Agar Toiv L'gabe D'sav L'kama Bishan B'hai Alma Kedusha Shemi. Please reveal all of those hidden storehouses of pleasure and reward to those who have tolerated and suffered for the sake of my holy name. Have igrin tavin diahavis. Give over all of the goodness that is hidden within you. That this is what the pasuk means when it says tzafon, give it over. That Tsfas is the place of concealment that reveals the positivity. Tsfas is that northern place of difficulty, of constriction, of concealment, but it's going to be the very place of the emergence of the or mufla remala that comes about when all of the difficulty is transformed into light. This is the secret of Yitzchak Avinu. Yitzchak Avinu is the dinam, is the gvuros, is the concealment, is the darkness, is the akeda, is the death-bringing speech of being stuck in all forms of stuckness. But at the very same time, Yitzchak is the secret of geula. Yitzchak is the joke. Yitzchak, the whole system of the Arizal, to one degree or another, is a joke of v'tischak liyom acharon. Yitzchak is Hatzi Kuf. It means to split 100. Yitzchak found Meya Sha'arim. He found the deep blessings that emerge from Gevura. But that Kuf is Hatzi Kuf. We have to break 100 into 50 twice. Why? Because Eitz Chaim has 50 Sha'arim. When we learn Eitz Chaim Kadisha from the first Shar down to the 50th Shar, we start off with Or Ein Sof and we end up in the Klipos themselves. We start off in a world of revelation and we find ourselves stuck in utter concealment and annihilation. And in that suspended punchline, we feel the heaviness of the joke that Hashem is telling us, Kavyachol, through the Ari, that yeah, there's really an absence here, there's really difficulty, and you can really be lost. But the deep secret of the joke of the Arizal, of cracking up 100 and breaking it into two sides of 50, is that we don't only learn the Eitz Chaim Kadisha from the beginning to the end, from the first Shar of Or Ein Sof down to the last Shar of Klipa, but rather we have to also from the end to the beginning in Or Choizer, and the secret of Yitzchak's laughter, of moving from the bottom back up to the top, of going back from Klipa all the way back up to Or Ein Sof. That's the joke of the Ari. The Arizal is the light of Yitzchak. It's the Sloik to Yitzchak that comes along and says, I need to allow you to enter into the particularization and the details and all of the dinim, where it appears that the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not abundantly present, but all of that is simply to create the renewed novelty that will come about when we find that even there Hashem is found, that the Kav is going to come down even farther, and every moment and detail and particular experience in this world is simply going to be another opportunity to rejuvenate ourselves, to give us that sense of cherus, the cherus of Binah, the ability to be mamtik kol hadinim b'sharasham, ad hatzimtzum atzmo, till we go back into the tzimtzum and we fix the tzimtzum with the tzimtzum, and we reveal the joke of the tzimtzum. That schoik is the gematria Or Ein Sof, the laughter at the end. The entire system of the Arizal is to allow us to linger in the possibility of Hashem being absent, only for each and every particular moment of absence to be transformed into another opportunity of pure and unadulterated revelation. Ad vias goyel tzedek. This is the secret of the Eitz Chaim. The Eitz Chaim is, the entire story is to learn how to breathe again. The air of Tsfas is the air of purification. We know of the Arba Iros. We know of the four holy cities of Hebron, Tiberia, Tsfas, and Yerushalayim. Eish, Ruach, Mayim, Afer, the water of Tiberia, the dust of Hebron, the fire of Yerushalayim, and the air of Tsfas. What is it about the air of Tsfas? What is it about the perpetual dusk-like state of being in between day and night that Tsfas inaugurates, it initiates within the individual? It's going to be the ability to breathe, like Rabbi Nachman said, learn how to breathe. Rabbi Nachman wanted to understand the secret of the Arizal. He wanted to understand the secret of breath. The Emek HaMelech, Rav Naftali Bacharach, says that the entire tachlis of the Tzimtzum was that first and foremost, the world was saturated with the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and then that air was taken away, and it left us with the suffocating air of Eretz HaAmim. Adam HaRishon was kicked out of Gan Eden, from the air of Gan Eden, the air of purity, the air of revelation, and he was kicked out into the place of pollution and suffocation. The entire tachlis of Brias HaOlam, the entire tachlis of the Tzimtzum, says the Emek HaMelech is not to leave the air of Gan Eden and then to try and return back to it, but rather it's to draw the air of Gan Eden into Eretz HaAmim, to reveal that even within the suffocating air of not being in Gan Eden, we have the ability to be mamshich, the avir of Gan Eden, as the Ramchal points out in his Hakdama to Adir Bamarom, his commentary on the Ijur Rabbah, which holds so many deep secrets of what the Arizal was about, and what Sfat is about, and what the Ir Miklat is about, and what Binah is about, and what the Teva of Noach is about. The Arizal, Pnimius HaTorah, is a Tevas Noach. It's the ability to find light specifically within the flood. This is the laughter of Yitzchak. This is the joke of the Arizal. The Arizal wants us to feel for a moment that there could be concealment in order to transform that concealment into the cracking up at the fact that, oh my gosh, I thought there was concealment. There is no concealment. All there is revelation. More and more revelation. Each shar is an opportunity to be Megala, a new yichud, a new way of connecting to the Rebbeinu Shalom. And it's specifically by way of Yitzchak. It's specifically by way of the Gevuros Memutakos. The Leshem spends so much time, more than any other tzaddik. The Leshem spends time teaching us. And there's really a sugya in the Grub, Ma'arav Tulchas Shetzefanta L'Reyecha. all simcha, all tainug, all joy, all emergence, all manifestation, all growth, all hope, all functionality comes from within the gevuros themselves. It comes from the engine that drives revelation, because pure chasadim left on their own are unmoving. They are simple in their unity, boring in their unity. It is specifically the motivation and the intensification that takes place through and in the tzimtzum itself that we come to uncover the secret of simcha, ki b'simcha teitzeyu, the simcha of tshuva, eim habanim smecha. This is the secret of the Arizal simcha. Rav Chaim Vital tells us that my Rebbe's ikar chiddush was simcha, was his laughter, was his ability to look at concealment and uncover the fact that it's rak b'simcha, it's v'yismach tzadikim, that it's the or of tzaddikim, it's the or tzaddikim kitov, it's the secret that all there is to be happy, all there is to affirm positivity, all there is to draw the light of the klal back into the prat, to reveal the chachma within Binah, to bring us back up to a level of keser, above the nun sharim. And this is where we're going to be functioning, within the space of Binah, within the space of understanding, havanas hadover mitoch davar, breaking one idea up so that it can be split in order to understand a duplicitousness that gives birth to a doubled expression of goodness, a doubled expression of revelation, that not only is the infinite the sight of the infinite, but the finite is also the sight of the infinite. Not only is the light the source of light, but the darkness is light as well. And that's the laughter of the Ari. That's the laughter that comes about from the Eitz Chaim Kadisha. That's the ability to be B'nai Binah Yemei Shmoina, to live with the Shmoina Sha'arim of the Arizal in the Nun Sha'arim. And Be'ezras Hashem, with all of this koyach, we're going to go into the sugyos of the Arizal, and we're going to begin to uncover the practical avodah of what we're capable of drawing down into our own lives through the confrontation with what appears to be differentiation and concealment, with the full knowledge that each and every moment of concealment is just another opportunity to be megalazayin, the fundamental chiddush of the unbridled and infinitely powerful light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's infinitude, Be'ezras Hashem.